Hi. The moment the text flashed on her screen, I knew. She smiled down at her phone. That secret smile. The one I used to think was for me. But now, it was for him. Ethan. Miss you already. 3 words. And everything I needed to see. She set her phone face down on the table, turning her attention back to the dinner I had made. As if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. For her. For us. She just didn't know it yet. You've been spending a lot of time at that dealership, I said, my voice calm, controlled. Ethan keeping you busy? I watched her carefully, my eyes never leaving her face. The slight flinch, the pause, before she picked up her fork. It was almost imperceptible. But I noticed everything. Oh yeah, we're just looking at some new cars. She smiled again, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. You know how I love luxury cars. I knew exactly what she loved. Ethan's luxury cars, his luxury life, and the promises he was making to her. But more than that, I knew she loved the fantasy, the idea that she could have it all. The money, the lifestyle, the man. She thought she was being careful, hiding the affair behind excuses and fake errands. But I wasn't stupid. I'd been tracking her every move for weeks. The lunches, the afternoons spent at the dealership, the late nights where she'd come home smelling like his cologne. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. That would be too easy. I'm sure Ethan's showing you all the best options, I said, forcing a smile. I wasn't going to let her see the anger simmering just beneath the surface. I wasn't going to let her know how close I was to taking everything from her. Oh, absolutely. She perked up, clearly excited to talk about him. He's got this convertible. It's stunning. We should go see it together. Together. I almost laughed at the audacity of it. Together. She had no idea what was coming. I leaned back in my chair, watching her. Maybe. We'll see. I kept my tone light, like I hadn't already read every single message she'd sent him in the past month. Like I hadn't seen the bank withdrawals. The money she'd siphoned from our joint accounts to fund her little fantasy. She thought she was clever. She thought she had control. But I was playing a longer game. And I was going to win. Later that night, after Laura had gone upstairs to get ready for bed, I sat in my office, the soft glow of the computer screen, lighting up the darkened room. I opened the auction website, scrolling through the items I'd listed under a pseudonym. Her designer clothes, the handbags she cherished, the jewelry. It was all going. I checked the latest bids. $6,000 for the handbag. $5,000 for the necklace I bought her last Christmas. It wasn't about the money. I didn't care about the thousands of dollars she had spent trying to impress Ethan. I cared about taking away everything that mattered to her. Piece by piece. I was stripping her of the life she thought she could build with him. She thought she was untouchable, hiding behind her lies. But by tomorrow, she'd come home to find her precious world crumbling around her. I had already set the stage. I had made calls, arranged for the auction to take place tomorrow while she was busy with Ethan. She'd be off with him, dreaming about their perfect life together, completely unaware that her things were being packed up and sold to the highest bidder. The shower stopped upstairs, and I could hear Laura moving around, getting ready for bed. I closed the laptop, my plan firmly in place. I wasn't a man to act out of impulse. Revenge is best when it's cold, calculated, and complete. And when I was done, Laura wouldn't have a single thing left. No designer clothes, no jewelry, no cushy lifestyle, and definitely no Ethan. I stood up, walking to the bottom of the stairs, looking up at the dim light spilling from our bedroom. She was humming softly to herself, completely unaware of what was about to happen. Everything okay? I called up, keeping my voice steady. Yeah. She called back, her voice cheerful. Just thinking about tomorrow. Busy day at work. Busy day. That's what she called it. Busy. Her text to Ethan said otherwise. They had a lunch planned, followed by a private test drive of the new car she wanted so badly. I almost smiled at the thought. I'll be heading out early. She added, don't wait up. I'm sure you'll have a great time. I said, keeping my voice light. But inside, I was already imagining her reaction. The confusion, the panic when she came home to find everything gone. The look on her face when she realized that her perfect little world had collapsed. Tomorrow was going to be a busy day for both of us. Later, as Laura slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind was racing, but it wasn't with anger or fear. It was with anticipation. I had everything in place, every detail carefully thought out. I'd let her think she was winning. I'd let her think she had fooled me, that she could have her affair and her luxuries without consequence. But I wasn't some clueless husband. I was the one in control now. Tomorrow, when she was gone, I'd make the final arrangements for the auction. By the time she returned, there would be nothing left. No clothes, no jewelry, no life of luxury. And as for Ethan, he'd be getting a call soon enough. I had done my research. He wasn't the prize Laura thought he was. He had his own skeletons, and I was more than ready to expose them. I turned my head, looking at Laura as she slept peacefully beside me. She had no idea what was coming. By this time tomorrow, her world would be in pieces. The sound of Laura's heels clicked down the hallway, growing fainter as she walked toward the door. I leaned against the kitchen counter, and nursing my morning coffee as I watched her go through the motions. Hair done, makeup perfect, dressed in that new designer coat she'd bought last week. She was heading out for her meeting, and she looked the part. "You're leaving early today," I said, keeping my voice casual. She glanced over her shoulder, flashing me that practiced smile. "Yeah, lots to do. I've got meetings all afternoon." "Meetings?" She didn't even try to cover it up anymore. "I'll be back later tonight," she added, adjusting her purse strap. "Don't wait up." "Of course," I said smoothly. "Have a great day." She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, her perfume lingering in the air as she turned and walked out the door, her heels clicking against the driveway. I listened as the car started. Then the sound of the engine faded as she drove off, heading straight for Ethan, exactly as planned. I waited for a few more minutes, sipping my coffee as I stared out the window. The house was quiet now, almost peaceful, the calm before the storm. It was time. I went upstairs first, to our bedroom. Laura's walk-in closet was a shrine to her obsession with luxury. Designer dresses, handbags that cost more than most people's rent, jewelry displayed in a velvet-lined drawer. It was all there, laid out like a monument to her materialism. She had spent years building this collection, and it was about to be taken from her in one fell swoop. I pulled out my phone, dialing the number for the auction house. I had arranged everything with the man on the other end answered almost immediately. "This mark we're on for today." He confirmed the details, and I hung up, slipping the phone into my pocket. Everything was in place. The movers would be here within the hour to start packing up her things. By the time Laura got back, it would all be gone. I started with her handbags, each one carefully placed in a storage box. It was almost poetic, packing up the things she valued most, knowing that they would never be hers again. Every bag, every dress, every piece of jewelry was a symbol of the life she thought she could build with Ethan. But today, I was taking it all back. An hour later, the movers arrived, just as planned. They worked quickly, efficiently, boxing up the designer clothes and packing the jewelry into secure cases. I watched them from the doorway, arms crossed, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction wash over me. By the time they were finished, the walk-in closet was nearly empty. The only things left were a few basic outfits, clothes she wouldn't miss right away, the essentials. Everything else was gone. "Thank you," I said, shaking the mover's hand as they loaded the last box into the truck. "I'll handle the rest." The truck pulled away, and I stood in the driveway for a moment, watching it disappear down the street. It was done. Her world was already crumbling, even if she didn't know it yet. Back inside, the house felt different, lighter. The weight of her lies, her deceit, it was all being lifted. I walked through the now empty rooms, my footsteps echoing against the hardwood floors. The living room, once filled with expensive furniture and art pieces she had insisted we buy, was barren now. The only things left were the couch and a couple of chairs. Stripped of the luxury she had surrounded herself with, I went back upstairs, taking one last look at the empty closet. She'd come home expecting everything to be just as she left it, expecting her life to continue as planned. She thought she had it all under control, but she was in for a surprise. I checked my phone. She should be with Ethan by now. They'd probably be laughing over lunch, discussing their next steps, maybe even planning to move in together. I almost felt sorry for her, the way she had let herself believe his lies. But then again, she had lied to me too. I walked over to the bed, picking up her phone from the nightstand. She had left it charging while she showered earlier, not even realizing she'd forgotten it. Careless, I unlocked the phone, scrolling through the messages. There it was again. Can't wait to see you later. I read Ethan's message slowly, letting the words sink in. It didn't matter. He didn't matter. By the end of the day, she wouldn't have anything left. She'd come home to find her perfect life ripped apart. And Ethan? He'd realize soon enough that she wasn't worth it. He had done this before, played the same game with other women, promised them the world, only to move on when things got messy. I'd already done my research. Ethan had a trail of broken promises behind him. Women who thought they were special, just like Laura did. But none of them ever got the life they dreamed of. And Laura wasn't going to be any different. I smiled to myself, tossing the phone onto the bed. Everything was falling into place. The afternoon passed quietly, and as the hours ticked by, the anticipation grew. I was ready. The auction would start soon, and Laura's things would be gone, sold to the highest bidder. There would be no turning back now. She wouldn't have the luxury of running to Ethan, pretending everything was fine. She'd have nothing left. No clothes, no jewelry, no status, no power. As the sun began to set, I poured myself a drink, leaning back against the counter as I waited. It wouldn't be long now. Laura would be back soon. And when she walked through that door, she'd find the world she thought she controlled completely destroyed. The door clicked open, and I heard the familiar sound of her heels on the hardwood floor. Right on time. "Mark," she called, her voice light. "I'm home." I didn't respond, just listened as she walked further into the house. I could hear her steps slowing, her pace faltering as she entered the living room. "Mark," she called again, this time more uncertain. I smiled to myself, taking another sip of my drink. Let the games begin. The sound of her heels clicked against the hardwood as she moved through the house. But the rhythm changed, faltering as she entered the living room. I could hear the hesitation in her steps, the sudden pause as she took in the empty space around her. "Mark," she called again, her voice edged with confusion. I didn't answer right away. I wanted her to feel it, the emptiness, the absence of everything she valued. I took another slow sip of my drink, waiting for the moment when realization would hit her, when she would understand what had happened. "Mark," this time. Her voice was sharper, carrying the beginning tremor of panic. I set my glass down on the counter and finally stepped into the hallway, watching her from the shadows for a moment. Laura was standing in the middle of the living room, her eyes wide as she stared at the barren space around her. The expensive furniture, the art pieces, the high-end decor. It was all gone. The room that had once been filled with her prized possessions now stood stark, stripped of its luxury. Her gaze flicked toward me as I stepped into the light, her face pale. What happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. I took my time, walking over to the empty wall where her favorite painting used to hang. I glanced at the blank space and then back at her, keeping my expression calm, almost bored. "I sold it," I said simply. Her eyes widened. What do you mean you sold it? Where is everything?" I met her gaze, my voice cold and steady. "Gone. I sold it all." Her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes darting around the room again, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She took a few shaky steps toward the dining room, where more empty space greeted her. The designer furniture she had spent weeks picking out? Gone. The crystal chandelier? Gone. Her jewelry? All gone. Why? Why would you do this? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Mark, what's going on? Gone. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms as I watched her unravel. I had waited for this moment. The moment when she would finally understand that she wasn't in control anymore. You don't get to ask that, I said, my tone sharp. You think I didn't know? You think I didn't notice the lies, the late nights, the money you've been stealing from our account? She froze, her breath catching in her throat. The color drained from her face as she stared at me, her eyes wide with panic. Mark, I can explain. No, I cut her off, my voice hard. You can't. I know everything. Laura, I know about Ethan. I know about the money you've been siphoning out of our account to fund your little fantasy life with him. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked completely stunned, like a deer caught in the headlights. I've been watching you, I continued, stepping closer. For weeks, I know about the lunches, the messages, the test drives with Ethan. I know what you've been planning. Tears welled up in her eyes as she shook her head, her voice shaking. Mark, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I wasn't. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Oh, you didn't mean for it to go this far? So what did you mean to do, Laura? Steal a little money? Have a little fling on the side? Or were you planning to leave me for him? Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. That's what I thought, I said coldly. You thought you could have it all. But you were wrong. She took a shaky step toward me, her hands outstretched, desperation in her eyes. Mark, please. I can fix this. We can fix this. I shook my head, unmoved by her plea. There's nothing left to fix. Her gaze flicked back toward the living room, her face crumpling as she took in the empty space. Where is everything? You didn't really sell it, did you? I stared at her for a moment, letting her question hang in the air. Then I smiled, a cold, satisfied smile. Yes, Laura, I said slowly. It's all gone. I sold everything. The handbags, the clothes, the jewelry, every single thing you valued. I sold it to the highest bidder. Her knees buckled slightly, and she grabbed the back of the chair for support. Tears spilled down her cheeks, her breath coming in ragged gasps. You can't do this. I already did, I said coldly, stepping closer. You think you can lie to me, steal from me, and walk away without consequence. You thought you could just keep taking and taking, but you were wrong. This is your consequence. Laura, everything you love is gone. Everything you used to hide behind. She let out a soft sob, her hands trembling as she wiped at her tears. Please, Mark, I'm sorry. I'll make it right. I'll get it all back. I let out another harsh laugh, shaking my head. Get it back? With what? The money you've been spending on Ethan? The money you've been funneling into your little escape plan? I could see the realization sinking in. The life she thought she was building. The future she thought she had with Ethan. It was all gone, crumbling right in front of her. Speaking of Ethan, I said, my voice icy. Did you really think he was going to give you the life you wanted? Did you think you were the only one? Her eyes snapped up to meet mine, confusion and fear mingling on her tear-streaked face. Ethan's done this before, I continued, stepping closer. You weren't the first, Laura. You were just another woman he could manipulate, another woman to help him close his deals. He used you, just like he's used others. Her face crumpled at that, the last shred of hope disappearing from her expression. She looked at me, broken, her voice trembling. Mark, I didn't know. I thought. You thought he loved you? I asked coldly. He didn't. He was using you, just like you were using me. She let out a choked sob, her hands covering her face as she collapsed onto the couch, her body trembling with the weight of the truth. I stood over her, my voice calm and final. It's over. Laura, we're done. Pack your things and leave. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with desperation. Where? Where am I supposed to go? I shrugged. I don't care. Call Ethan. See if he'll take you in. But something tells me you're not going to get the response you're hoping for. I turned and walked toward the stairs, leaving her sobbing in the empty living room. I didn't feel anything. No regret. No sadness. Just a cold sense of satisfaction. The woman I had once loved was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. And now, she was paying the price for her betrayal. The door to the bedroom clicked shut behind me, the muffled sound of Laura's sobs still echoing through the house. I stood by the window, staring out into the darkened yard, the lights from the street casting long shadows across the lawn. It was done. Everything I had planned, everything I had put into motion, it had all come together perfectly. Laura's world had crumbled around her, and now, she was left with nothing but the mess she had created. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was free. The sound of footsteps behind me pulled me from my thoughts, and I turned to see Laura standing in the doorway, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked broken, hollow, like a woman who had finally realized the depth of her mistakes. "Mark, please," she whispered, her voice raw. "Don't do this." I stared at her for a moment, feeling nothing but the cold satisfaction that came with knowing I had the upper hand. She had no power left. "There's nothing left to say." "Laura," I said quietly, "I'm done." She shook her head, stepping forward. "We can fix this. I'll make it right. Promise. I'll get everything back. We can start over." I let out a harsh laugh, shaking my head. "You still don't get it, do you? There's no starting over. You killed that the moment you decided to betray me, the moment you chose him over us." Her lip quivered, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to?" I snapped, stepping toward her. "You didn't mean to lie to me? You didn't mean to steal from me? To funnel our money into your little fantasy with Ethan? You didn't mean to plan a future with him behind my back?" She sobbed, shaking her head. "No, I didn't. I was stupid. I thought he could give me something I didn't have." "And how did that work out for you?" I asked coldly. "You thought Ethan was going to save you? You thought he was going to sweep you off your feet and take you to some perfect little life? He doesn't care about you, Laura. He never did. He used you, just like you used me." Her face crumpled and she sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands covering her face as she wept. I watched her for a moment, but I didn't feel any sympathy. I didn't feel anything at all. "You need to pack your things and leave," I said finally, my voice calm, but firm. "You're not staying here." She looked up at me, her face pale. "Where am I supposed to go?" I shrugged. "That's not my problem. Call Ethan. See if he'll take you in. But something tells me you're not going to get the response you're hoping for." Her lower lip trembled, and she wiped at her tears, her voice shaking. "Mark, please, don't throw me out. I don't have anywhere else to go." I stared at her, my heart cold. She didn't have anywhere else to go because she had burned all her bridges. She had built her life around lies and deceit. And now, she was finally facing the consequences. "I'm done, Laura," I said quietly. "There's no coming back from this." Her shoulders shook with sobs as she buried her face in her hands. But I didn't stay to watch. I turned away, heading for the door. I wasn't going to drag this out any longer. I had already taken everything from her, and there was no point in prolonging the inevitable. As I reached the door, I paused, looking back at her one last time. "You should have been honest with me. You should have told me the truth. But you didn't, and now you have to live with that." With that, I walked out, leaving her sobbing on the bed. I stood in the living room, my gaze drifting over the empty space where Laura's luxuries used to be. The house felt different now, lighter, freer. The weight of her lies had been lifted, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. I heard the soft thud of a suitcase being dragged down the stairs, and a moment later, Laura appeared in the doorway, her face pale and drawn. She had packed a small bag, barely enough to hold more than a few outfits. Her shoulders slumped as she dragged the suitcase behind her. her once confident posture now replaced with defeat. She paused by the door, her eyes flicking to mine, silently begging for another chance. But I didn't give her one. I'll have the rest of your things sent to wherever you're staying, I said coldly. But you're not coming back here. She nodded weakly, her hand trembling as she reached for the door handle. For a moment, she hesitated, as if waiting for me to change my mind, to call her back. But I didn't. I just watched as she opened the door and stepped outside, the cold night air rushing in around her. Without another word, she walked down the driveway, disappearing into the darkness. I closed the door behind her, the sound echoing through the empty house. It was over. Laura was gone, her betrayal exposed, her life of luxury stripped away. There was nothing left to tie me to her, no reason to hold onto the anger and pain she had caused. I had taken everything from her, just as she had tried to take everything from me. And now, I was free. I poured myself another drink, walking to the window to watch as her figure grew smaller, fading into the distance. She would have to face the consequences of her actions alone now. And whatever life she thought she had with Ethan was about to collapse. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry anymore. I felt nothing but a cold sense of satisfaction. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. And as for me, I had already moved on. It had been a month since Laura walked out of the house, and I hadn't heard from her since. I didn't need to. I knew she was gone for good, just as I had intended. The house had been sold, the final pieces of our shared life packed away and sent off to the highest bidder. I had no interest in holding on to the past. I had already started over, building something new, something free from the lies and betrayal that had poisoned my marriage. As I stood on the porch of my new place, staring out at the quiet street, I felt a strange sense of peace. The anger, the resentment, they were all behind me now. I had taken control of my life again, and I wasn't looking back. She had nothing left, and I had everything I needed. Bye.